Andrew here from The Investor's Way, and welcome to Woody's Weekly Wisdom, episode number 55. And today we're looking at some doom and gloom again, unfortunately, and still. But here we are looking at this headline: Per-capita recession deepens as economic growth sinks to 0.1%. So let's get the ads out of the way. And this is all about Treasurer Jim Chalmers and what he's got to say about recent data coming out showing that the Australian economy barely grew in the last 3 months of 2024, growing by just 0.1%. And if you're playing along, you will know that technically our recession is where GDP growth is negative for 2 quarters in a row. So to have growth of just 0.1%, we are teetering very close to triggering at least the first quarter of a possible recession. Now, obviously the word recession tends to generate a great deal of fear in both the economy and in households, because normally recessions represent tough times for a lot of people. So let's delve into the article, because we've been told here at the top that the per capita recession deepens. And so that might be news to people that we're even in a recession, because technically we're not. But let's have a look at what it's saying. And basically it's saying that the Australian economy is at a standstill, and that that meagre 0.1% growth cut our annual growth to just 1.1%. And basically that's the worst it's been since the pandemic. And that is also the weakest result since the end of the early 1990s recession. So, lots of doom and gloom in the data and what's driving it, because I know from talking to lots of people that things are pretty tight in the household budget. Don't like using that word, but if you know what I prefer, the money planner. But of course, the household income and expenses are very tight because of these rapid rises in interest rates, and the impact that that's having on this GDP growth is quite phenomenal. Because in looking at doing today's weekly wisdom video for you, one of the other stories was about how there's a risk that interest rates are going to have to go up. And you'd be thinking, well, if they're trying to control inflation through the use of the sledgehammer that is interest rates, why is it that our capital growth or per capita growth is in a recession? And it's pretty simple. If you look at it, without going into too much ranting, the simple fact is the higher the interest rates go, the more that cost has got to be passed on. So whether the interest rate's being passed on from the landlord to the tenant, or from the business owner to the retailer, those costs have got to be paid by somebody. And ultimately, it's the mum and dads who are paying the cost of the higher interest rates. And as a result, that fuels inflation, which then fuels more interest rate rises, and you can see we're now in a vicious circle. And what's happened is that with this tightening of interest rates, that has resulted in households not having as much funds to spend, which is slowing the GDP growth. So you would think they'd all work in sync, and they'd all be talking to each other and understanding the ramifications of one on the other, but it seems like all good politicians, they're only ever across half the story. So in this case, we're looking here and seeing that our per capita, our GDP per capita, which they're saying is a measure for living standards, actually slipped to further 0.4% across the quarter, and that's the 5th consecutive quarter where the rise in our population more than doubled the rate of our economic growth. So what they're basically saying there is that without the rise in our population, which is coming from immigration, if we weren't getting that population rise, we would technically be in a recession, because we're just not got the capital growth. per capita. So the last 12 months, GDP per capita was 1.3% lower than the previous, and as a result, you're seeing a large negative shock or recession, according to the Commonwealth Bank's head of Australian economy, Gareth Aird, which is interesting. And then you've got the politicians saying, well, we've clearly vindicated our fiscal strategy in our May budget, which is to give people some handouts to help them, and that's highly unlikely to do a great deal for anybody. A $300 handout, is just going to be gone in a whisker. And if interest rates go up, forget it. The $300, little handout that you got will be chewed up by the interest rate rises. So it's always the way where the politicians get it so wrong. And it's all about election cycles. So a $300 handout, you could technically describe that as a bribe in an election year or coming up to an election. That's just a nice way to say, look what we gave you in the last budget. You've got to hang on and give us another shot at this. The simple fact is interest rates are being used as a sledgehammer, and that is causing everybody to rein in their spending. But for whatever reason, prices are still going up. And that will be because of the interest rates. So forget about what the politician says. We won't spend much time there because that's not necessarily going to give us a lot of insight. But we are coming into a scenario where a lot of Australians, I think anybody under the age of 44 has never experienced a sustained recession. And I say sustained because technically we had a recession during COVID, but with all of the handouts, we came out of that very, very quickly, and it wasn't really a sustained recession. And because everyone was locked up and in-house, it had very little impact. But, these numbers are suggesting with 5 consecutive quarters of negative per-person GDP growth that we're technically in a household recession. So the household is feeling the pinch quite dramatically, and as a result, non-discretionary purchases, they're shrinking, and non-discretionary purchases have to obviously continue to be made. That's your food and living expenses that are required to just survive, and they're increasing, which is putting more and more pressure on the household income and expenses. And that's a result of this so-called stubborn inflation, which I've already ranted about as to why that's the case. And then we've got rapidly rising utility costs, and that's all flowing on to the cost of food, the cost of rent, and all of that is putting a lot of pressure on the household consumption. So I've got a number of clients who are in the industry of food and beverage, and they are telling me that people might still be going out for dinners or breakfast or lunch, whatever it might be, but they're just not spending the same amount per head. So it looks like restaurants are nice and full, but the spending levels are down, and that's because people just don't have the same amount of free cash flow because it's all been chewed up when these things like electricity, rent, or mortgage costs and the flow-on cost of higher food. So all of that is hurting the spending, which is slowing down our GDP growth. But the interest rate rises are not slowing down inflation because, as I've said many, many times, it's a circular argument, and they're using a sledgehammer approach without any real consideration for the flow-on effect. And it's just not going to work in this environment. Keep hitting us with higher interest rates, and you'll see a whole lot more pain in the street. So we've seen, building companies are going out of business. I'm hearing lots and lots of cafes are going out of business across the country, and any more interest rate rises, and we'll probably see more of that. So that's the doom and gloom, and I won't go into all the rest of this article because it's pretty much saying all the same that I've already said. But how do we take advantage or use this information for our own benefit and our own money circumstances? Well, the simple fact is you will be experiencing these higher costs, And so it does mean that the discretionary spending may need to be reined in a little bit more, just so that you've got funds for the non-discretionary, but also so that you can continue to put some aside for your future self. So it might feel like you're sucking the life out of your entertainment budget, or you're just putting some more restrictions on enjoying life, hopefully for a short period of time. But the main thing to see here, and that's not what I was looking to do, but the main thing to see here is that you need to keep making sure that you're putting money into your investments throughout this period where everything else feels hard, and it might feel like there's nothing to put aside for investing. You may need to just rein in a few of those discretionary items so that you can continue to put money into investing. Because the thing is, if this does turn out to be a recession, you will find that there's massive opportunity with your investments during that time frame. And those people that are wise enough to put some money aside to be able to invest during a period of tighter money periods, they will do really, really well in the following 5 to 10 years. So it's a great opportunity to set yourself up. So if you can, rein in a little bit of the discretionary stuff to make sure you've still got money available for investing, and then take advantage of any downturn in the market that might come if we go into a recession. It's still a might, and it's still a possibility that we will trade our way out of this. The government is looking to continue to bring people into the country, which is going to fuel capital or per capita growth, but it's also going to create jobs and so forth. Might put a lot of pressure on housing in the short term, but hopefully we can find a solution for that as well. So the main story here is try not to be overwhelmed by the fear that is in the media when it comes to something like a recession, and look at your own spending and see where you might be able to make some adjustments to make sure that you're still putting some aside for your investing, so that you're looking after your future self and you're taking advantage of what's going to be the opportunities that present if we do go into a recession. So that is this week's Weekly Wisdom, episode number 55. As always, do me a huge favour. If you're watching this on YouTube, click the little bell up there to get notified when these videos come out, and hit the subscribe button. And if you're watching on Facebook and LinkedIn, leave us a comment down below, hit the like button, share this if you can to your audience so we can spread the good news. And I don't mean this necessarily is good news, but spread the news about financial literacy so more and more people can get a positive outcome when it comes to their money scenario. So hit the like, comment and share buttons, and I will see you again next week for episode 56 of Weekly Wisdom, or Woody's Weekly Wisdom. Have a great week. Cheers.